Alongside Rob Lewis and Brent Hubbs, I'm Austin Price for the Rocky Top Roundtable on this Ole Miss week. Guys, Tennessee just continues to roll. They're winning the turnover game. They're cutting down on the penalties. Offensively, they're exploding. Just an impressive 2-week stretch here for Tennessee's football program. It doesn't matter who they're playing against. They couldn't have done this the last couple of years, but they're doing it now.
Well, I think, Rob, you said it best on the podcast. They're just fun. I mean, they're entertaining to watch. And this is a Tennessee fan base that's been looking for something from an entertainment value, and they're getting it right now.
They're starved for entertainment value. Even a couple of years ago when Jeremy Pruitt and his team rattled off with 6 straight wins to close the year, I mean, that wasn't exactly exhilarating football. And Austin turned to me in the press box in the third quarter the other day. He's like, "Man, this is boring." And I'm like, "You're so spoiled after 2 weeks. You know, do you remember what you've been watching for the past 3 years?"
You know, but this team, Austin, is playing well. I mean, they're Bayless Jones is making plays, as you see there in the slot. They're finding some weapons. I think the biggest thing about this team over the last 2 weeks is, I don't want to say they found their identity because you knew what they were. They found the pieces to go with that identity. And moving Jones into the slot has helped, seeing the defense flying around. Hendon Hooker is obviously the biggest catalyst. As you've talked about for months, it's all about the quarterback in terms of how quick this happens.
Well, it really is. I mean, it's kind of like, you try to make your grandmother's favorite, cake or whatever, and you're missing one ingredient that doesn't make it the way she was. They found all the ingredients to make the perfect successful deal, and he's leading the way. Hendon Hooker is playing really good football, Brent, and just seems so calm and so collected, both on and off the field.
Well, he is. He's playing well. Rob and I were talking about it earlier. I mean, if you look at the snap count and the number of stats, Hooker and Matt Corral's numbers are not that far off. I mean, they're not the exact same, but they're not that far off. Matt Corral's a Heisman Trophy candidate, and nobody in the country knows Hendon Hooker's playing quarterback at Tennessee.
Yeah, and especially since he moved into the starting job. I mean, I guess he's completing 70% of his passes. He's thrown 10 touchdowns with no interceptions. And I mean, he's got 13 on the year, but I'm talking about since he has been the clear-cut starter. He's not turning the ball over. He had a couple of fumbles early on, and the bad interception against Pittsburgh when he came in after Joe Milton got hurt. But and Coach Heupel talked about it this week. Just you can see he's comfortable, he's confident, he's poised. And in talking to the players, it's abundantly clear that they believe in him. That he's got his teammates' confidence.
Ole Miss doesn't let many people get behind them. They play 6 defensive backs. It's why most teams can gash them with the short stuff and gash them on the ground. Tennessee's very, very comfortable handing the football off to Tyon Evans and Jabari Small, who will play this week. Unless Ole Miss changes their approach, which could happen. Obviously there's some.
We've seen that this year.
There's some discontent there between Lane Kiffin and his defensive coordinator, DJ Durkin. But unless they change their approach, I'm sure Tennessee will be just fine to hand it to number 8.
Well, and I think the challenge for Tennessee is going to be patience. Because you feel like you got to score every possession because Ole Miss scores every possession. So are you going to be willing to go 12, 13 plays on a drive, and kind of take some time off the clock without intentionally taking time off the clock, but you're taking what the defense gives you. To me, when I look at this Tennessee offense the last 2 weeks, that may be the most impressive thing that they've done. It's not just about throwing it deep and chunk plays. Yeah, they've got a bunch of chunk plays. But you go back to the first drive against South Carolina, Rob, they play off coverage. They're bailing out. They don't want the ball behind them. So what does Tennessee do? They go on a 14-play drive for their first touchdown, and they just dink and dunk and run their way down the field. This offensive staff in their play calling has been pretty patient through these last couple of games in particular.
Yeah, I almost think it's funny, and I think Tennessee's, there's probably other coaches out there, but I think Josh Heupel is probably more aggressive than Hendon Hooker is when you're talking about looking for the big plays down the field. I mean, I think he wants to call an aggressive game and dial those up, and I think it's Hooker's nature to kind of take care of the football and take what is there. And so I think those two are meshing really well. But once you're talking about taking what's there, being patient, long drives, Tennessee's going to have to do what they've done these last 2 weeks. No penalties.
And no turnovers, which leads me to my next talking point. Tennessee's been able to get some turnovers the last few weeks. Matt Corral has not yet thrown an interception on the year. Can they bait him into something to where he maybe makes a turnover or a mistake early I think this crowd could play, a huge role in this game, especially if Tennessee can get some early momentum.
Yeah, you would hope so, Austin. I just don't know that they can create that mistake. I look at what Matt Corral did against Arkansas this past week and the numbers he put up, over 100 yards rushing, 2 rushing touchdowns, nearly 300 yards passing, two touchdowns, no turnovers. A year before, he threw it up for grabs 6 times to Arkansas. I think he's certainly growing and evolving as a quarterback. What can Tim Banks dial up against him? Can they get there with any kind of pressure without blitzing all the time? Can they bait him into something? Nobody's been able to bait him into anything to this point, but he's not played in front of a real hostile crowd to this point, although I guess he went to Tuscaloosa and didn't turn the football over, right?
Yeah, they just didn't have a chance to win that football game. If you're Tennessee defensively, do you throw any extra wrinkles at them, or do you just be who you are?
Oh, I think with your limited numbers, Rob, and kind of where you are, I think you got to be you. I just don't think you can suddenly come out in a dime package and a bunch of exotic stuff that you're haven't spent the last 2.5, 3 months figuring out what to do.
I agree, and I think we're not coaches' meetings. We don't know, but the feeling I think we've all gotten is that Tim Banks has simplified things for this unit, especially compared to last year and how exotic they wanted to be. And I think they stick. I think your 7th game of the year, you're more than halfway through. You dance with who you brought at this point in time.
Yeah, you are who you are, right? Because could they play 6 defensive backs? I think with the way Brandon Turnage played and the numbers, yeah, I think you could go there. But can you fit everything up the way you need to? Because Ole Miss is not afraid to run the football either.
No, they're not. I mean, basically last week they had 3 100-yard rushers, 2 backs, and then Corral was right there around the 100-yard mark too. So, I mean, to me, that's the biggest concern if you're Tim Banks and Tennessee's defense is Matt Corral's ability to run and to make plays with his feet. And we saw that last week with, South Carolina with like a 3rd and 15 or whatever, and kid just jogged 17 yards out of bounds, and everybody was like, I mean, I think that's bound to happen at some point this week where Corral makes a play. Tennessee's got to get off the field on 3rd down.
Well, I think the hard part for Tennessee in this game, for me, is when Emory Jones got outside the pocket, he was looking to do one thing and one thing only. He was going to run the football. He was tucking it under there and go. Matt Corral will run right up to the line of scrimmage, a little Patrick Mahomes-like, if you will, and he has no problem stopping 6 inches from the line and flipping a ball somewhere. So if you're a linebacker, how are you supposed to defend that? What do you do? I'm coming up to stop him, and I think that's the challenge for Tennessee's defense this week is his ability to continue to look for a passing play when he's running. They haven't played one of those quarterbacks who's done that this year.
Biggest key in Saturday night's game is what?
Don't turn the football over.
Yeah, I agree.
You can't give them extra possessions. That's how Arkansas got beat.
Yeah, I agree. And like what I would say, don't turn the football over and be good 3rd down defense.
I will echo all of that, and I will throw in the crowd. I think the crowd makes a huge difference in this football game, especially if they can get into it early. I know Corral's not turning the football over. I know Ole Miss is explosive offensively, but Neyland, when it gets loud, it just kind of sits in there, and it gets even louder and louder. So I think the crowd's got to play a huge impact. And hey, they're chomping at the bit to have an impact on this game.
Well, and this team's been great in the first quarter. Can that continue? Because if you can get out of the blocks and get something going, that place is waiting on something, Rob.
It's a powder keg.
I mean, somebody's pushing the old TNT box.
I mean, they're ready. First night game. I mean, not counting the Thursday night. I mean, and teams won two SEC games in a row. They're 56-3 the first quarter of the last 2 weeks. I mean, it could get explosive.
And if they can get off to that quick start offensively, the headsets over there on that Ole Miss side between Durkin and Lane Kiffin could be fun to listen to.
Could be a powder keg in its own right.
That's exactly right. He's Rob Lewis and Brent Hubbs. I'm Austin Price for the Rocky Top Roundtable.